Let us begin with a statistical ghost that haunts every corporate boardroom, every entrepreneurial meetup, and every therapist's couch in the Western world. The number is not 50%, it is not 70%. It is a devastating, almost incomprehensible 90%. 90% of the human population, according to a meta-analysis of longitudinal studies on life satisfaction and career attainment, will die having never approached the outer limits of their innate capacity. They will not be failures in the conventional sense. They will hold jobs, raise families, pay taxes, and post smiling photographs on social media. They will be functional, productive, and even admired by their peers. But they will be asymptotes, curves that approach a line they never quite touch, trajectories that arc toward a summit they never scale. The tragedy is not that they tried and failed. The tragedy is that they never truly tried at all. They engaged in what the psychologist Abraham Maslow called the Jonah complex, the fear of one's own greatness, the active avoidance of one's highest potential. It is a fear that is more common than the fear of failure because it is more existential. The fear of failure is a fear of external judgment. The fear of success is a fear of internal transformation. To reach your potential, you must become someone you have never been before, which requires the death of the person you are now. And most people are not willing to kill their current selves, even for the promise of a superior resurrection. They cling to the known, the comfortable, the predictable as a shipwrecked sailor clings to a piece of driftwood, not realizing that the shore is only a mile away and that letting go of the wood is the only way to swim to it. This is the foundational pathology of unrealized potential, a profound, unexamined commitment to staying small. Now, let us dissect the first and most insidious barrier to potential, the illusion of time. The human brain, particularly in its younger, more plastic stages, operates under a cognitive bias known as temporal discounting. We discount the value of future rewards in favor of immediate gratification. This is the neurological basis of procrastination. But there is a more subtle variant, which we might call temporal inflation. This is the belief that time is a commodity that can be accumulated and spent later. You tell yourself, I will start that business when the kids are older, or I will write that book when I have more experience, or I will travel when I have enough savings. This is not planning, it is displacement. You are deferring your potential to a hypothetical future version of yourself who is somehow more capable, more disciplined, and more courageous than the person you are today. But that future version does not exist. The only version that exists is the one you are building right now, and you are building it by the choices you are making at this very moment. The data on life regrets collected by palliative care nurses is remarkably consistent. The number one regret of the dying is not that they did not work harder, but that they did not have the courage to live a life true to themselves rather than the life others expected of them. The time was always available, the courage was not. The time will never be more available than it is today. Every day you defer your potential, you are not conserving energy, you are eroding the very muscle of your will. The habit of deferral becomes a structural weakness, a neural pathway of avoidance that deepens with each repetition. By the time you are 50, the pathway is a superhighway, and the thought of taking a different exit is terrifying. The illusion of time is the most expensive lie you will ever believe, because it costs you your life. Consider the architecture of the modern workplace, which is a masterfully designed system for the suppression of potential. The corporation, the government agency, the large institution. These are not engines of human flourishing, they are engines of predictability. They reward conformity over creativity, obedience over initiative, and stability over innovation. This is not a conspiracy, it is a structural emergent property. The system optimizes for the average because the average is manageable. A team of average performers is a predictable revenue stream. A team of exceptional performers is a volatile and unpredictable asset. The system does not want you to reach your potential. It wants you to reach your assigned ceiling. This is why performance reviews often reward solid work over brilliant work. Brilliant work is disruptive. It challenges the hierarchy. It makes the manager look inadequate. The brilliant employee is often perceived as a threat, not a benefit. The system will subtly, and sometimes overtly, punish you for exceeding your mandate. It will give you more work, more responsibility, but not more pay. It will isolate you from your colleagues. It will label you as difficult or overly ambitious. This is the social punishment for potential. To survive, most people learn to cap their performance, to produce just enough to avoid criticism, but not enough to attract attention. They become masters of the strategic underperformance. They are not lazy, they are rational. They have calculated that the cost of exceeding the ceiling is higher than the benefit, but in doing so, they have traded their potential for a quiet, comfortable mediocrity. The tragedy is that they did not even realize they were making the trade. They thought they were being realistic. Now, meet a character you have not encountered before, a woman we will call Eleanor. Eleanor is a 36-year-old corporate lawyer in Sydney, working for a top-tier firm. She is brilliant, possessing a razor-sharp analytical mind and an intuitive grasp of complex commercial structures. She has been told since law school that she is partnership material. But Eleanor is miserable. She dreads coming to work. She spends her days drafting contracts that she finds intellectually hollow and ethically ambiguous. She dreams of becoming a children's author, a fantasy that she has dismissed as impractical and financially irresponsible. She has a folder on her laptop containing 3 incomplete manuscripts, which she has not opened in 2 years. She tells herself that she will write when things settle down, but things never settle down. The cases pile up, the billable hours accumulate, and the dream recedes into the distance. Eleanor is a perfect representation of the potential gap. She is not unintelligent, she is not unmotivated, she is trapped. Trapped by the golden handcuffs of her salary, the expectations of her family, and the social status of her title. She has identified so completely with her profession that she cannot imagine who she would be without it. The thought of leaving the law is not just a career change, it is an existential crisis. She would have to grieve the death of the identity she has built over 15 years. And grief is more painful than dissatisfaction, so she stays. She stays, and she slowly dies on the inside, 1 billable hour at a time. Her potential is not located in a different job, it is located in a different self, and she is unwilling to build that self. But let us push deeper into the neurological architecture of this paralysis. The brain is a prediction engine. It creates models of reality based on past experiences. If you have spent 15 years being a lawyer, your brain has built a vast, interconnected network of neural pathways that are optimized for legal reasoning. These pathways are efficient, well-myelinated, and energy efficient. Shift to a career as a children's author would require the brain to build entirely new pathways for creative writing, for narrative structure, for emotional resonance. This process is called neuroplasticity, but it is not frictionless. It requires the pruning of old pathways and the growth of new ones. This is metabolically expensive. The brain, which consumes 20% of your body's energy, is inherently conservative. It does not want to spend energy on uncertain outcomes. It prefers the well-worn path of legal reasoning, even if that path leads to misery, because it is a predictable source of reward, salary, status. The brain is not your friend in this context, it is your gatekeeper. It is actively resisting the transformation you claim to desire. This is why just doing it is such an inadequate piece of advice. You are not just doing a task, you are fighting a multi-billion-year evolutionary legacy of energy conservation. To overcome this, you must not rely on willpower, you must create a reward gradient that is steep enough to incentivize the new pathways. Eleanor did not realize that she needed to associate the act of writing with a powerful, immediate reward. Not the distant fantasy of publication, but the immediate pleasure of creative expression. She needed to make the new pathway more pleasurable than the old one. She could do this by giving herself permission to write badly, to write without judgment, to write as a form of play, not as a profession. But she was too perfectionistic to allow herself that pleasure. Her perfectionism was another gatekeeper. Let us examine the psychological dimension of perfectionism, which is the most socially acceptable self-destructive trait in the Western world. Perfectionism is not a desire to be excellent. It is a defense mechanism against the shame of being imperfect. The perfectionist sets impossibly high standards, and then uses the failure to meet those standards as a justification for not even trying. If you do not try, you cannot fail. If you do not fail, you do not have to feel the shame of inadequacy. This is the logic of the cowardice of high standards. Eleanor told herself she could not write because she was not a good writer, but she had never allowed herself to be a bad writer long enough to become a good one. She was demanding a level of competence from her novice self that she would never demand from anyone else. This is a form of internal tyranny. The Stoics called this epistemological arrogance, the belief that you should be able to achieve mastery without the necessary phase of incompetence. The only way to reach your potential is to tolerate the shame of being a beginner. You must be willing to be a fool in public. You must be willing to produce work that is substandard, because substandard is the only prerequisite for standard, which is the prerequisite for excellent. Eleanor eventually, after a major depressive episode, took a sabbatical from law. She went to a small town in the Scottish Highlands and forced herself to write 500 words a day, regardless of quality. The first week was excruciating. She wrote sentences that made her cringe, but by the third week she began to notice something. The act of writing itself was becoming pleasurable. She was not focusing on the outcome, she was focusing on the process, and the process was healing her. She realized that her potential was not a destination, it was a direction. She was not trying to be a successful author, she was trying to be a writing person. The identity shift was subtle but profound. Now, let us pivot to the concept of learned helplessness, which was discovered by psychologist Martin Seligman in his experiments with dogs. In the classic study, dogs were subjected to electric shocks that they could not escape. Eventually, they stopped trying to escape, even when the opportunity was presented. They had learned that their actions were futile. This is exactly what happens to human potential. You try, you fail, you try again, you fail again. Each failure is a shock. After enough shocks, your brain stops trying. It develops the belief that your efforts are irrelevant to outcomes. This is the belief system of the 90%. They look at the world and see a system that is rigged, arbitrary, and indifferent to their aspirations. They are not entirely wrong, but they are making a critical error. They are confusing the system with the totality of reality. The system may be rigged, but you are not a passive participant in the system. You are an active agent with the capacity to navigate the rigging. The difference between the 90% and the 10% is not that the 10% do not experience helplessness, it is that they have learned to override it. They have developed what psychologist Albert Bandura called self-efficacy, the belief that they have the capacity to execute the actions required to achieve a goal. This belief is not a delusion, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe you can, you will persist longer, try more strategies, and recover from setbacks faster. If you believe you cannot, you will give up at the first sign of difficulty. The 90% have learned helplessness, the 10% have learned optimism. The difference is not a fixed trait, it is a mental muscle, and like any muscle, it can be trained. Consider the life of a man we will call Charles, not the Charles from earlier, but a new archetype, the late bloomer. Charles was a 52-year-old high school chemistry teacher in a small town in the American Midwest. He was a good teacher, well-liked, but deeply frustrated. He had always dreamed of being a research scientist, but he had abandoned that dream in his 20s when his family could not afford graduate school. He married, had children, and settled into a life of quiet, responsible mediocrity. At 52, a catastrophic event occurred. His wife left him for another man, his children were grown and distant, and he was diagnosed with early-stage heart disease. He was, in his own words, a flatlining man. But instead of surrendering to the despair, he did something unexpected. He enrolled in a part-time master's program in material science at a local university. His classmates were 22-year-olds who called him Grandpa. He was embarrassed, self-conscious, and physically exhausted. But he persisted. He studied late into the night, often falling asleep at his desk. He struggled with the math, which he had not used in decades. He failed his first exam, but he did not quit. He asked for help. He found a tutor, a 19-year-old physics prodigy who was brutally honest about his weaknesses. By the end of the program, Charles had not only passed, he had designed a novel polymer composite that had industrial applications. He patented it. He licensed it to a small manufacturing firm. At 56, he was not a world-renowned scientist, but he was a contributor. He had finally tapped into the potential that he had buried for 3 decades. The tragedy is not that Charles succeeded late, it is that he was a victim of the false timing fallacy, the belief that there is a deadline for potential. There is no deadline. Your potential does not expire at 30 or 40 or 50. It only expires when you decide it is expired. The body ages, but the mind is plastic. The capacity for learning, growth, and transformation is a lifelong capacity. The only expiration date is the one you place on yourself. But why do we place these deadlines on ourselves? The answer lies in the social tyranny of comparison. We do not measure ourselves against an objective standard. We measure ourselves against our peers. We look at the 25-year-old tech billionaire and feel like failures. We look at the 30-year-old CEO and feel hopelessly behind. This is the availability heuristic at work. We overestimate the prevalence of outlier success because it is overrepresented in our media environment. We do not see the millions of people who started later and succeeded. We only see the exceptions. The 90% are paralyzed by these comparisons. They conclude that if they have not made it by a certain age, they will never make it. They then proceed to prove themselves right by giving up. The Stoic would say, do not compare yourself to others, compare yourself to your past self. Are you better today than you were yesterday? Are you more courageous, more disciplined, more self-aware? If the answer is yes, you are on the right trajectory. The speed is irrelevant. The direction is everything. The 10% do not compare themselves to external benchmarks. They compare themselves to internal ones. They ask, am I living up to my own values? Am I making progress on the things that matter to me? The answer is not always yes, but it is more often yes than no. And that frequency compounds over time. Let us now examine the role of energy management in the pursuit of potential. The 90% are chronically exhausted. They wake up tired, they work tired, they go to bed tired. This is not a natural state. It is a state of chronic overcompensation. They are spending energy on things that do not matter. Social drama, political outrage, endless scrolling, mental rehearsals of conversations that will never happen. This is energy leakage. The 10% are not necessarily more energetic. They are more efficient in their use of energy. They have learned to protect their cognitive resources through ruthless prioritization. They say no to things that do not align with their goals. They avoid toxic people who drain their energy. They structure their days to align with their natural chronotypes, working on their most important tasks during their peak cognitive hours. Eleanor, after her sabbatical, returned to law, but she did not return to the same lifestyle. She negotiated a 4-day work week. She dedicated her 5th day to writing. She stopped attending networking events that did not serve her. She started going to bed at 10 p.m., limiting her screen time to 1 hour per day. She found that she was more productive in her 4 days of law than she had been in 5, because she was not fighting a war against exhaustion. The energy she saved was redirected to her writing. She published her first children's book at 39. It was not a bestseller, but it was a book. She had proven to herself that her potential was not a fantasy, it was a reality that she had simply refused to inhabit. Now, let us address the most profound and most uncomfortable dimension of unrealized potential, the fear of abandonment. When you change dramatically, your relationships change. The people who love the old you may not love the new you. Your spouse may feel threatened by your ambition. Your friends may resent your growth because it highlights their stagnation. Your family may pressure you to stay grounded. This is social pushback, and it is powerful. It activates the same neural circuits as physical pain. The 90% are exquisitely sensitive to this pain. They would rather maintain their relationships at the cost of their potential than risk the social isolation of growth. The 10% have made a painful peace with this reality. They understand that growth is a lonely process. They are willing to lose some friends, to disappoint some family members, to be misunderstood by colleagues. They know that the people who truly matter will eventually adapt, and that the ones who do not adapt were not true allies, they were anchors. Charles, the late blooming chemist, lost a few old friends who could not understand why a 52-year-old man would waste time on a degree. He felt the sting of their judgment, but he did not let it stop him. He found a new community, his fellow graduate students, his mentors, the industry contacts he made, who celebrated his ambition. He traded a network of familiarity for a network of growth. It was a difficult trade, but it was a necessary one. The fear of abandonment is a fear of losing the self you have known. But the self you have known is the self that is not reaching its potential. Losing it is not a loss. It is a prerequisite. Let us also consider the narrative of limitation. We all have a family story that we inherit. In Charles's family, the story was, we are practical people. We are not intellectuals. We do not take risks. This narrative is internalized and repeated until it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The 90% are the prisoners of their family narratives. They do not even recognize these narratives as external impositions. They believe they are their own choices. But if you examine the origin of your most limiting beliefs, you will often find a parent, a teacher, or a cultural norm that planted the seed. The 10% have engaged in a deliberate narrative revision. They have consciously rewritten their life story. They have framed their struggles as training, their failures as feedback, and their aspirations as inevitable. They have taken the raw material of their lives and molded it into a story of agency, not victimhood. This is not denial, it is reinterpretation. The events are the same, the meaning is different. Eleanor, after her depression, reframed her story. She did not see herself as a failed lawyer who escaped to writing. She saw herself as a writer who had spent 15 years learning about human behavior, which made her a better writer. The law was not a detour, it was research. This reframing allowed her to integrate her past rather than reject it. She was not starting over, she was building on. The narrative shift was the key to her liberation. Now, let us discuss the practical mechanics of reaching your potential. It is not a grand, sweeping transformation. It is a series of small, daily, imperfect actions. The 90% are waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect clarity, the perfect confidence, the perfect plan. The 10% take imperfect action. They start before they are ready. They learn by doing, not by thinking. Eleanor wrote her first children's book not as a polished manuscript, but as a series of rough, handwritten drafts. She did not wait for inspiration. She set a timer and wrote for 30 minutes, no matter what came out. This is the discipline of showing up. The potential is not in the outcome, it is in the process. The process is the training ground for your character. Every time you show up, you are strengthening your self-efficacy. Every time you act despite fear, you are weakening the neural pathway of avoidance. The 90% are waiting for the courage to act. The 10% act, and courage follows them like a shadow. It is not the other way around. You cannot think your way into a new way of acting. You must act your way into a new way of thinking. This is the fundamental insight of behavioral psychology. The mind follows the body, not the other way around. If you start the physical action, writing a word, making a call, sending an application, your mind will adjust to rationalize the action. It is easier to believe you are a writer after you have written a page. It is easier to believe you are an entrepreneur after you have sent a pitch. The action precedes the identity. The action is the only thing that matters. Let us also recognize the role of mentorship and community. The 90% try to do it alone. The 10% seek out guidance. They understand that potential is not a solo endeavor, it is a collective enterprise. They find people who are ahead of them and absorb their wisdom. They find peers who are at the same level and create mutual accountability. They find mentees and teach them, which reinforces their own learning. The 10% are not embarrassed to ask for help. They know that the question is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of intelligence. Charles, in his graduate program, actively sought out mentors. He asked professors to critique his work. He formed a study group with his younger classmates who helped him with the math. He did not let his age or his ego get in the way. He was a learner. The 90% are too proud to be learners. They do not want to appear foolish. They hide their ignorance, and their ignorance grows. The 10% expose their ignorance, and their ignorance is replaced by knowledge. The courage to be a beginner is the courage to grow. Finally, let us address the existential vacuum that the 90% experience. This is the feeling that life is meaningless, that their efforts are futile, that they are going through the motions. This vacuum is not a sign that life has no meaning. It is a sign that they have not found their purpose. Purpose is not something you discover, it is something you construct. It is the intersection of your skills, your passions, and the needs of the world. The 90% are looking for purpose in external sources, their job, their relationships, their possessions. They never find it because it is not there. Purpose is an internal orientation. It is the decision to dedicate your life to something larger than yourself. Eleanor found her purpose not in writing children's books, but in the act of storytelling itself. The connection she felt with her readers, the joy she gave to children. Charles found his purpose not in the patent, but in the process of scientific discovery, the thrill of solving a problem that had stumped others. Purpose is not a noun, it is a verb. It is the ongoing, active engagement with life. The 90% have stopped engaging. They are watching their own lives from the sidelines, spectators in their own existence. The 10% are in the game. They are players, not spectators. They are making mistakes, taking hits, scoring points, feeling the adrenaline. The game is the reward. The engagement is the meaning. So, here is your final, unassailable instruction. You are not Eleanor or Charles or any of the characters I have described. You are you. And you are reading this script not passively, but actively, because something inside you is stirring. That stirring is your potential, knocking at the door of your consciousness. It has been knocking for years, but you have been too busy, too tired, too afraid to answer. Tonight, you will answer. You will not wait for a perfect plan. You will not wait for the right time. You will not ask for permission. You will write down one specific, measurable, achievable action that you can take tomorrow morning to move toward the person you know you could become. It does not have to be a grand gesture. It can be a single small step, but it must be a step, and the day after tomorrow, you will take another step, and the day after that, another. This is not about reaching your potential, it is about pursuing it. The pursuit is the point. The 90% are standing still, waiting for the current to carry them. The 10% are swimming against the current, not because they enjoy the struggle, but because they know that the shore is out there, and they will be damned if they die without reaching it. You are a swimmer. You have always been a swimmer. You have just forgotten. This script is your reminder. Now, swim.